Hi guys, I'm back today with another fraction recipe, and today I'm making salt dough. Now I will say this is definitely a little bit more tricky than my fraction truffles video, so if you haven't checked that out, you should definitely watch that one first. Alright, so you guys are gonna help me a little bit with this math of making some salt dough, because I have this recipe right here that I found. But the recipe is for a class of 24 students. Now, I don't have a class of 24 students. I only want to make enough salt dough for 2 people, my sister and me. So you guys are going to have to help me change this from a recipe for 24 people into a recipe for 2 people. So I'm going to give you guys a minute. Why don't you pause the video to try to figure out how you might do it. All right, so here's a hint if you need it. You can think about this, since we want a recipe for 2 people instead of 24. We want a recipe that is 2/24 of our original. Now we can say that an equivalent fraction of 2/24 is 1/12. So we want a recipe that is 1/12 of our original recipe. And you know that when we're talking about fractions, of means multiplication. You can pause it again if you want some more time. But now I will show you what I did to get my correct measurements. So what I'm going to have to do is multiply all these measurements you see here on the side for number of cups by 1/12. So let's start off with 14. We're going to multiply 14 over 1 by 1/12. Now we can cancel out a common factor from the top and bottom. What's that common factor? Shout it out. Yes, it's 2. So we can turn this into 7 and this 12 into a 6. And we end up with a product of 7/6. So that means we're going to need 7/6 cups of flour for our recipe. Now, luckily, we have the same amount of water that we did flour, so we don't have to do any extra math there. We know that that's also going to be 7/6 cups of water. All right, now for salt, we've got a different number. Here we've got 5 cups. I won't go into as much detail here with the multiplication. It just ends up being 5/12 cups of salt. Now for the vegetable oil, that one's not too tricky. We just have 1 cup of vegetable oil. So when we multiply by 1/12, we end up with 1/12 cups of vegetable oil. Sorry, 1/12. And finally, we have 3/4 cups of cream of tartar. So for that, we're going to do 3/4 times 1/12. Now, any common factors? What's a common factor in our numerator and denominator? Shout it out. Yes, 3. So we're going to turn this 3 here into a 1, and this 12 becomes a 4. So we end up with 1/16 cups of cream of tartar. Okay, I'm all ready to start my recipe. Or maybe not. I'm seeing now that I might have a little bit of a problem. Why? Well, because I have all these measurements that I'm supposed to use in my recipe. 7/6, 5/12, 1/12, 1/16, but I don't have measuring cups for those. All I have are my 1/4, 1/3, 1/2, and 1 cup measuring cups, and this old teaspoon that I found lying around. And I'm going to have to find some way to measure out those amounts only using the measuring cups that I have. So let's think about how I can do that. What I'm going to suggest is I'm seeing a lot of 12s in the denominator here. We have 5/12 and 1/12, and then 7/6 here, those 2. I could just multiply the numerator and denominator by 2 to get an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 12. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about these measuring cups in terms of twelfths. Instead of having this be 1/4, I'm gonna call that 3/12. Instead of having this be 1/3, I'm gonna call it 4/12. Instead of having this be 1/2, I'm gonna call it 6/12. And instead of having this be 1, I'm gonna call it 12/12. So now I'm gonna use that to help me figure out how I can measure out the amounts that I need. So I'm gonna give you a minute here once you pause the video if you need to. How can I measure out 7/6 cups of flour using the measuring cups I have? Well, luckily for you, there are many different correct answers. One that I thought about at first was I can use 1/2 cup, which is going to get me 6/12, and 2/3 cups, which is going to get me the rest of the way to 7/6. 1/2 plus 2/3 equals 7/6. So I can use 1/2 cup plus 2/3 cups to get me to 7/6. Now I could do the exact same thing to measure out the amount of water I need, but I'm gonna make my life a little bit harder. And I'm gonna challenge myself to find a different way to measure out 7/6 cups of water. For this one, I'm gonna think of 7/6 as 1 plus 1/6. So for the 1, I'm just gonna use my 1 cup. That's simple enough. For my 1/6 though, that's a little bit more difficult. And I'm actually gonna bring in my teaspoon here. Now, you guys may or may not know this fact, but 1 teaspoon is equal to 1/48 of a cup. And so to get my 1/6 extra cup that I need, I'm gonna need 8 teaspoons. So for this, I'm gonna use 1 cup plus 8 teaspoons. All right, now next up is 5/12 cups of salt. So for this one, I'm gonna perhaps think of 5/12 as 8/12 minus 3/12. And this is, again, just one way for me to do this. There are other ways that you could have also used. If we think about it as 8/12 minus 3/12, that's the same as 2/3 minus 1/4. So for that, what I would do is I would fill my 1/3 cup up twice, and then I would take away from that 1/4 cup. All right, so here we've got 2/3 minus 1/4. And if you do that out, you do indeed get 5/12. Okay, next up is our 1/12 cup of vegetable oil. So that one, what I'm gonna do is another subtraction. And I'm gonna say, I know that 1/3 cup is 4/12 and 1/4 cup is 3/12. So if I take a 1/3 cup and I subtract off a 1/4 cup, and that little space right there is what I'm gonna get, that would be 1/12 cup. So we're gonna do 1/3 minus 1/4. Now this last one is probably the most tricky because here we don't have a denominator of 12, and there's no way we can get a denominator of 12 with equivalent fractions. So instead, I'm going to turn to my teaspoon and think back to this rule that I have here. 1 teaspoon equals 1/48 cup. 1/16 is actually equivalent to 3/48 cups. And as a teaspoon is 1/48 of a cup, then all I need to do is add 3 of these to get my 1/16 cup. So for this, we're going to use 3 teaspoons. Time to add all of our ingredients into this pot. First up is the flour, of which we need 1/2 plus 2/3 cups. So I'll fill up my 1/2 cup measuring cup first. There's our 1/2 cup, and then we need 2/3, so I'm gonna fill up our 1/3 cup measuring cup twice. 1/3, 2/3. Next up is water, and I'm going to need 1 cup plus 8 teaspoons. So I've got my cup, got my 1 cup of water. Now 8 teaspoons. You guys are gonna have to help me count here, all right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All done. Next up we have the salt. Remember to wash your measuring cups between ingredients. So we're supposed to add 2/3 cups minus 1/4 of a cup. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a full 1/3 cup, just like this. Full 1/3 of a cup. There we go. And then I'm going to, for my next 1/3 of a cup, I'm gonna pour a full 1/3 cup and then pour out a 1/4 cup from that. So here we go, our next 1/3 cup. Fill it up again. Just like this. Same thing we did last time. Except this time we don't dump it all in. What we do now is we take the 1/4 of a cup and we pour out a 1/4 of a cup of salt. Luckily, since we're not gonna eat this, it doesn't have to be super duper exact. Pour out a 1/4 cup of that. Once that 1/4 cup is full, then we know we've poured out a 1/4 cup and we add the remaining salt in the 1/3 cup. Next up is the vegetable oil, and I think that this one is going to get a bit messy, so this would definitely be the time to ask for a parent's help. But we're gonna use kind of the same strategy that we did for the salt. So I'm gonna start by filling a whole 1/3 cup of vegetable oil, but I'm not going to dump it in. Instead, what I'm gonna do is pour off a 1/4 cup of it. If a little bit leaks in, that's okay. So I'm gonna pour into here as neatly as I can. There we go. And then I'm going to add the remaining. Now you might be wondering, how am I gonna get this 1/4 of a cup back into the bottle? I'm gonna use a funnel to do that. Finally, we have our cream of tartar, which is actually not creamy at all and is in fact powder. And we only have to add 3 teaspoons of that. Open this up and we'll get 1, 2, and 3. There we go. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to stick this on the stove for a little bit. I'm gonna mix it all together. And it's gonna dry down a little bit into something that's kind of like Play-Doh. So I will show you what it is at the end. There you have it, the finished Play-Doh. Now all I did is I just put it on the stove and stirred it together a while until it thickened and turned pink. No, I'm just kidding. You may notice that it's pink. I added in a little red food coloring to make it pink to match our Valentine's Day theme. And I added in a little rose essential oil too, just to make it smell nice. Now I do have to let it cool for about 30 minutes, I think. It's definitely too hot to play with right now. And then afterwards I can play with it like I would with Play-Doh, and I can do anything with it. So I'll post an update and I'll let you know what I decided to make with my salt dough. Here I am throwing my ball of salt dough up in the air. It's really just exactly like Play-Doh. I hope you enjoyed this video and keep an eye out later this week for some more fun math videos.